At 4 p.m. in the Tower of London, prisoners would typically begin to wind down their activities for the day. If they had been assigned work, they would likely finish up and return to their cells. If they had spent the day in their cells, they would continue to do so. As evening approached, prisoners would begin to prepare for the final meal, which was usually served around 5 or 6 o'clock. Like breakfast and lunch, the meal was typically a simple and unappetizing affair, consisting of a small portion of bread, cheese, or soup. After dinner, prisoners would have a brief period of time to relax or engage in leisure activities, although this time was still tightly controlled and restricted. They might be allowed to read, write, or pray, but any activities were subject to the approval of Tower officials. As night fell, the Tower became even more isolated and confined. Prisoners were locked in their cells for the night, with only a small candle or oil lamp to light their surroundings. The sounds of the Tower guards and the occasional creaks and groans of the ancient building would provide a constant reminder of their captivity. At 5 p.m. in the Tower of London, prisoners would typically gather in the dining hall for the evening meal. The meal was usually the last substantial meal of the day and was similar in composition to earlier meals of the day, with just a small portion of bread. The dining hall was a communal space where prisoners would eat together, although strict rules were enforced to prevent any communication or interaction between prisoners. This was done to maintain order and prevent any plots or plans from being hatched among the prisoners. After dinner, prisoners would return to their cells and spend the remainder of the evening in isolation. They might engage in quiet activities such as reading or writing. During the evening, prisoners would also have to contend with the challenges of living in a cramped and unsanitary condition. They might struggle with pests such as rats or fleas, or deal with the discomfort of sleeping on a thin mattress on a cold stone floor. Torture was used selectively for individuals accused of treason, hearsay, and other serious crimes. Torture methods employed in the Tower of London included the rack, the scavenger's daughter, and the manacles. These were designed to cause immense pain and suffering, often to extract confessions or information. It is possible that prisoners in the Tower of London during the Tudor period were subjected to the sounds of others being tortured. The intention would have been to instill fear, break their will, or coerce them into providing information. Given the close quarters and the lack of soundproofing in the medieval structure, it would have been difficult for prisoners to avoid hearing the cries of others being tortured. The psychological impact of hearing these sounds would likely have been profound, causing significant distress and potentially leading to long-term mental health issues. In Tudor times, rats often infested dungeons and prisons, including the Tower of London, as these places provided ample opportunities for nesting, scavenging, and breeding. The presence of rats in the Tower of London would have been a significant issue for the prisoners. Rats are known for being carriers of various diseases, such as bubonic plague, which could spread rapidly among the prisoners in the confined spaces. Additionally, the rats could inflict further discomfort and suffering on the prisoners by nibbling on their food or biting them when they slept. The presence of rats could also contribute to the psychological torment of the prisoners, as the rats would serve as a constant reminder of the unhygienic and inhumane conditions that they were being held. The infestation would have further deteriorated the prisoners' physical and mental well-being. As night falls, the prisoner is locked up for the night. They may be given a candle for a few hours, but most of the time is spent in darkness. The cell is likely to be damp and cold, and the prisoner may have to huddle under a thin blanket for warmth. Throughout the night, the prisoners may be tormented by fears of what awaits them. They may hear the sounds of other prisoners being tortured or executed, and they know that their own fate is uncertain. Some of the torture methods used on the prisoners included the rack. This device consisted of a wooden frame with a roller at each end. The victim's ankles and wrists were tied to the rollers, and the rollers were turned, gradually stretching the victim's limbs. This method caused extreme pain, dislocation, and potential tearing of muscles, ligaments, and tendons. The scavenger's daughter, also known as the Skeffington's irons, was an A-shaped iron device that compressed the victim's body, forcing their head to their knees. This method caused immense pain and could lead to internal bleeding, organ damage, or even suffocation. The manacles. This method included suspending the prisoner by their wrists, which was shackled with iron cuffs and attached to a chain hanging from the ceiling. The victim's feet barely touched the ground or were left dangling. The weight of their body caused excruciating pain in the wrists and shoulders, and prolonged suspension could lead to dislocation, nerve damage, or restricted blood circulation. Nighttime was particularly difficult for Tudor prisoners in the Tower of London, and after the evening meal, the guards would lock the cell doors, and the prisoners were left alone in darkness for most of the night. They were poorly lit and often damp, which could make it difficult for prisoners to get any rest. Many prisoners would try to pass the time by praying or meditating, or by writing letters to loved ones if they were permitted to do so. However, they were always aware of the sounds of the guards moving about outside their cells and the occasional cries of other prisoners who were being tortured or executed. The Tower of London was also home to a menagerie of wild animals, including lions, tigers, and bears. These animals were kept in cages and could be heard roaring or growling at night. Even the presence of these animals added to the eerie and unsettling atmosphere of the prison. For some prisoners, the night time was a time of deep despair and fear. They knew that they were at the mercy of the authorities and that they could be executed at any time. Others may have felt a sense of numb resignation, knowing that their fate was already sealed. In addition to the conditions inside the cells, there were other factors that made nighttime in the Tower of London particularly challenging for prisoners. For example, the Tower was a place of great historical significance, and many of the buildings had been used for centuries as royal residencies, armories, and prisons. Some of the buildings were rumoured to be haunted, and prisoners may have heard stories of ghosts and other supernatural phenomena. The Tower was also located in the heart of London, and prisoners could hear the sounds of the city outside their cells. They may have heard the hustle and bustle of merchants and traders, the ringing of church bells, and the cries of street vendors. For some prisoners, these sounds could be a source of comfort, as they reminded them of the outside world and the life that they had left behind. However, for others, the sounds of the city could be a painful reminder of everything they had lost and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Overall, nighttime in the Tower of London was a time of intense emotions and uncertainty for prisoners. It was a time when they were cut off from the outside world and left to face their fears and anxieties alone. For many, it was a time of profound sadness and despair as they grappled with the reality of their situation and the uncertain fate that awaited them. Please continue to support my channel by subscribing. Please comment, like and subscribe if you wish for more stories, and leave your suggestions below and I will endeavour to cover them.